At 70 years old, Reba McEntire has become something more than just a country music legend. She's earned the right to look back not just at her towering career, but at the people, the pain, and the relationships that helped shape who she is today. For decades, fans have admired her not only for her powerhouse voice and signature red hair, but for how she carried herself, with grace, grit, and sincerity. And now, with years of stories behind her, she's ready to open up in a way she never truly has before. For years there have been whispers, tales of tension, rumors about family splits, and raised eyebrows whenever Kelly Clarkson's name came up in the same breath as Reba's. Were they close? Were they distant? Did the divorce between Kelly Clarkson and Reba's former stepson Brandon Blackstock fracture something within their bond? For fans of both women, these questions lingered, never truly answered but never quite fading either. But now Reba is no longer holding back. "When I say I love Kelly, I mean it," Reba says in a voice raw with emotion that matches the resonance of her most powerful songs. "She will always be part of my family in ways deeper than paperwork or last names or who's married to who." For anyone who's followed Reba McEntire's journey since her beginnings in the Oklahoma rodeo circuit to the bright lights of Nashville and beyond, her loyalty to family has always been at her core. Whether it was standing by her band after tragedy struck or guiding those closest to her during personal storms, Reba's compassion has never been performative. It's real, and it runs deep, especially with people like Kelly, who walked into her family not just through marriage but with open arms, a kind heart, and a voice that reminded Reba of what it means to fight for your place in the world. Their connection didn't begin at a wedding. It began years earlier on stage. When their voices blended for the first time in 2007, fans could feel it. The version they released of Because of You wasn't just a duet, it was something hauntingly intimate, as though two sides of the same coin had finally come together. One, the veteran, the queen of contemporary country. The other, a new force of nature fresh off her American Idol victory, full of fire and soul. Together they didn't just harmonize musically, they complemented each other's energy. Strength meeting strength, heart meeting heart. Reba has often said that moment marked something profound, not just respect between artists but something deeper. That performance was more than just two singers blending voices, she once shared. It felt like two women telling the same story from different chapters of the same book. Still, life has a way of testing even the strongest bonds. When Kelly married Brandon Blackstock in 2013, becoming Reba's daughter-in-law, the family circle grew closer. Reba welcomed Kelly with warmth, humor, and kindness, treating her not as an outsider but as someone who belonged from the beginning. Dinners, vacations, phone calls for advice, their connection only seemed to strengthen. It wasn't unusual to spot them smiling next to each other at concerts or laughing backstage during rehearsals. They matched each other not just lyrically, but in life. But what happens when the thread binding relationships begins to tear at the edges? In 2020, the divorce between Kelly and Brandon hit headlines like a thunderclap. Custody battles, public disagreements, media speculation, all of it came crashing into the lives of those involved, and fans couldn't help but wonder, where did Reba fit into all this? Would she take Brandon's side? Would she remain neutral? Or would she walk away from Kelly altogether? To understand Reba's response, you have to understand her heart. She's not one to jump into conflict with tabloid instincts. She's lived too much, seen too much, and lost too much to make enemies out of people she once called family. Instead, she chose understanding. "Divorce is hard for everyone," she said, "especially when there are children involved. The role I chose wasn't to pick sides. It was to show up with love." And she did. When the dust began to settle and fans looked toward Reba for answers, what they got instead was something more valuable: consistency. Through interviews, performances, and even subtle gestures of support, one thing became clear: her bond with Kelly hadn't been shattered in the storm. If anything, it had transformed. Changed, yes, but not broken. Because when Reba loves, she does so without conditions. And when she supports someone, she walks beside them, whether the cameras are rolling or completely shut off. For a time, the silence between them spoke louder than any quote could. While fans speculated and headlines dissected every detail of Kelly's divorce, Reba held her ground with quiet dignity. She appeared in interviews, yes, but never gave in to the temptation to fan the flames. Not once did she criticize Kelly, not in passing, not on stage, not in private circles, and certainly not in public. That alone said everything. Reba knew better than most what it means to unravel a life in plain sight. Long before social media turned personal pain into internet spectacle, she had experienced her own share of public heartbreaks. Her divorce from her first husband Charlie Battles left her at a crossroads in her younger years. Years later, her split from Brandon Blackstock, Brandon's father and Kelly's former father-in-law, changed the very fabric of her family dynamic. And yet through each transformation, Reba retained what she's always been known for: resilience simmering beneath a gracious exterior. It's that lived experience that shaped her response to Kelly's hardship, not as a celebrity, not even as a former mother-in-law, but as a fellow woman who's looked heartbreak in the face and kept singing through the tears. "I know what it means to feel lost," Reba once admitted in an emotional sit-down. "I know what it means to pick up pieces after the picture you had of your life has been shattered. It doesn't matter how famous you are, when something falls apart, the pain is real. And when you've built a life with someone, especially with kids involved, there's no room for people to assume or play judge." Her voice cracked slightly in that interview, not from drama, from the weight of truth. With 2 children, River Rose and Remington, caught in the emotional wildfire of Kelly's divorce, Reba stepped into a role that many grandmothers, bonus mothers, and aunts know all too well: someone in the background, steady and safe. It wasn't about doling out advice, it was about presence. She's been there quietly, when the cameras weren't, supporting, encouraging, sending messages not through Instagram stories or flashy PR moves, but with quiet, unwavering connection. That's the kind of person Reba McEntire is, the kind who doesn't need to perform compassion. She lives it. But let's be honest, it's not all sweetness and saccharine sacrifice for the camera's sake. Reba's love comes with backbone. Her career wasn't built on politeness. It was built on determination, on a refusal to let the world define her, on a willingness to step up when others might bow out. And that's part of what she admires most about Kelly Clarkson. "You know, she reminds me of myself," Reba once said with a proud, almost protective tone. "She's a fighter. She stands her ground. She walks through a storm and comes out with her head held high, maybe soaking wet, but still standing." That comparison isn't just flattery, it's insight. Both women rose from humble beginnings. Both faced early skepticism in male-dominated rooms. Both lost, learned, and grew publicly. And both found a way to make heartache a part of their music, not as a gimmick, but as therapy, as truth. Kelly's catalog in recent years has become a journal, each song drenched in real-life emotion. And Reba noticed that evolution. "I heard pain in her voice, but also fire. The kind of fire you can't fake." That's when you know someone's not just an artist, but an honest-to-God storyteller. Not everyone in Reba's place would react the same way. It would have been easy to retreat, to draw boundaries, to fall back on legal ties and say, "We're not family anymore." After all, Kelly and Brandon divorced. Narvel and Reba had already split years earlier. On paper, the bond should have dissolved. But Reba defies that idea. Because to her, family isn't about signatures or status, it's about choice, it's about heart. And when she chose to love Kelly, she meant for the long haul, even if circumstances around them changed. So when Reba finally did speak out, really speak out about where she stood, her words weren't calculated. They were warm, resolute, eternal. "I'll always be in Kelly's corner," she said. Not because she was married to Brandon, but because I love the kind of person she is, and I always will. There was no pretense, no rehearsal, just a 70-year-old woman sitting in her truth. And now, as she continues to look ahead to her own legacy, while watching Kelly carry her own torch, Reba feels pride, not ownership, not obligation, just pride. The kind you feel watching someone you care about rise from the wreckage stronger than before. Because for Reba McEntire, telling the truth about Kelly Clarkson isn't about clarification. It's about celebration. Long before the world knew them as family, Reba McEntire and Kelly Clarkson knew each other as artists. That's where their real journey began, not at a wedding altar or a family Christmas, but on a stage where both women let their guard down through a song. When they shared the mic for Because of You, something electric happened. Not explosive or theatrical, something quieter, something deeply felt. Fans sensed it too. It wasn't just a duet, it was a collision of two generations with the same emotional frequency. Young women watched and saw themselves. Two strong, capable artists, exposing scars through melody, refusing to mask pain behind perfection. Reba, in her iconic red gown, and Kelly, with her trembling but powerful voice, moved beyond performance into something resembling communion. They weren't just blending voices, they were extending hands, and in that space between notes, a bond was born, not of blood, but of bravery. Still, even the strongest bonds are tested over time, by distance, life choices, and of course heartbreak. Kelly's divorce from Brandon wasn't just personal, it became instantly public, dissected in real time, episode by episode. Everything from financial settlements to custody, to support payments, was splashed across headlines and pushed into algorithms. For someone as emotionally transparent as Kelly, the pain of trying to rebuild her life while raising two children in the spotlight was almost unbearable. And again, fans wondered, where did Reba stand? Whispers filled tabloids. Was Reba loyal to Brandon? Was there bitterness with Kelly? Did Reba retreat? Was she offended by how things unfolded? But Reba never issued ultimatums, never demanded sides. Instead, she did something far more difficult than making a public declaration. She stayed present. When Kelly returned to her talk show with tired eyes and emotional interviews, she never mentioned family fallout. She spoke of healing, of motherhood, of making breakfast for her kids before heading into rehearsals. Through her vulnerability, it became clear that someone was in her corner, quietly cheering her on, someone older, wiser, and familiar with that kind of quiet endurance. That someone was Reba. Behind closed doors, there were calls, texts, encouragements. I love you. You're doing great. Keep your chin up. Nothing for the press, everything for the person. Because Reba has lived years watching personal challenges clash with public demands, and she knows the danger of feeling alone in a room full of applause. After all, Reba's own life took a sudden turn in the early 1990s when she lost members of her touring band in a tragic plane crash. It was a moment that shook her to her core, one that reminded her just how fragile everything really is. In that moment, fame didn't matter, charts didn't matter, the only thing that did was love, people, connection. That loss fundamentally changed Reba, gave her a deeper sense of empathy that has followed her in every personal relationship since, including with Kelly. So when Kelly stood on stage during her most heartbreaking album cycle, tears misting her eyes as she performed songs about betrayal and survival, Reba watched not with judgment, but with reverence. She put her heart on the table, and then sang through it. Reba said, "That's not just brave, that's holy." And somehow, through all the tumult and transformation, these two women found their rhythm again, maybe not in the way the world expects, with Instagram selfies and red carpet events, but in the quiet knowledge that their bond survived something many never do, the unraveling of family. Today, Reba and Kelly may appear side by side less often, but the respect is just as strong, maybe stronger. It's become less about appearances and more about legacy. Less about shared stages, and more about shared resilience. To some in the public, that may seem like distance, but it's not. It's evolution. Reba once explained it best: when someone walks through the fire with you, you never forget how they made you feel in the middle of the flames. And for Kelly Clarkson, knowing Reba was in her corner, even when everything else felt like it was falling apart, meant more than any public statement ever could. It meant safety. It meant strength. Because even as marriages ended, and headlines screamed, nothing inside Reba changed. She still saw Kelly as that same strong, funny, grounded Texas girl, who walked into their family with a sense of humor and a voice that could level arenas. That love has always remained. Because Reba knows that the truest kind of relationship isn't about being seen together. It's about being there when no one else is watching. By the time Reba turned 70, most artists her age had already faded from the spotlight, or retreated into a quiet retirement. But not Reba McEntire. Her fire still burns, in her music, her acting, and most importantly her relationships. She sings with the confidence of someone who's seen it all, survived the worst, and still believes in showing up, not just on stage, but in the lives of those who matter to her. That's part of what makes her connection to Kelly Clarkson so layered and so sincere. It's not just history. It's not just music. It's not even just family by marriage. It's a thread that's woven through the very essence of who they both are. Two women raised far from red carpets, deeply rooted in values, and shaped by struggle, success, and the constant reinvention of themselves. Reba grew up in small-town Oklahoma, riding horses and singing hymns in the car with her siblings. Kelly, in small-town Texas, belted out Mariah Carey ballads in her bedroom before anyone knew her name. Neither had money, neither had industry connections. What they had, and still have, was a voice and a story to tell. So much of their bond is unspoken. Reba doesn't need to explain heartache to Kelly. She knows Kelly already understands it. Just like Kelly never had to justify her parenting choices to Reba, a woman who has mothered, step-mothered, mentored and loved people through all seasons of life. That's the kind of support Kelly leaned on when the storm clouds gathered. And when the world wondered whether Reba's loyalty would shake, whether her love had terms and conditions, the answer was quietly, powerfully. In interviews, Reba kept expressing the same message, sometimes directly, sometimes between the lines. Kelly will always be family. Not she was family, not we're figuring things out, just simply, always. And that word carries weight, coming from Reba McEntire. Because this is a woman who's faced an entertainment industry that didn't always make space for strong women. A woman who had to create her own niche by pushing through closed doors, cracking open genres, and redefining what country music could be. She knows that standing firm in the face of change is no small feat, whether personally or professionally. She saw that same steel in Kelly, especially during the quieter moments. When Kelly chose not to slam her ex publicly, when she focused on her children, when she stayed rooted to her truth, even when it was inconvenient or uncomfortable, Reba took notice. She's a good mama, Reba told a close friend. When everything got loud, she got steady. That's something I admire. It's not surprising then, that the two women still hold deep mutual respect. Kelly herself has never spoken a negative word about Reba. In fact, in her most vulnerable moments, she's spoken glowingly about the support she's received, one that's felt maternal, musical, and uniquely strong. That bond never needed social media validation. It was never about press tours or photo ops. It's something more intrinsic, like learning the rhythm of someone's heart, simply because yours beats the same way. Even as their professional paths have taken slightly different directions, Reba exploring television roles, returning to the Opry stage, producing new music, and Kelly thriving with her talk show, her Vegas residency, and her emotional new albums, the thread connecting them remains firmly tied. Reba didn't step away from Kelly when Brandon left. She didn't fade into the background because the papers changed. She did what real family does. She showed up in spirit, in silence, and sometimes in song. That loyalty is rare in a world that often reshuffles relationships based on circumstance, and it's even rarer among celebrities, where statements are drafted by publicists and connections are measured in Instagram likes. But for Reba, love isn't a strategy, it's a decision, one she makes daily. So when she finally sat down, turned to the camera, and spoke directly, not in defense, not as clarification, but as truth, it landed like thunder on a still night. I didn't lose Kelly in the divorce. That's not how I roll. 7 words. And in them forgiveness, faith and family, the kind you choose even when you don't have to. Now at 70, Reba still takes to the stage with a voice full of heartache, hope and history. And Kelly takes her own stage, different show, different spotlight, but the same unshakable truth under her skin. Both women, rising out of different endings, singing new beginnings, threads still intact. Because love like theirs, it doesn't unravel, it just changes form. It's easy to look at celebrity relationships and assume they function on different rules. Fame amplifies every misstep. Privacy is rare, and bonds are often kept alive for image or influence, more than emotion. But Reba McEntire and Kelly Clarkson defy that narrative entirely. There's nothing performative about their connection. It wasn't manufactured in a recording studio or sculpted by PR teams. It's real, complicated, evolving, but grounded in something many relationships, famous or not, often lack: authenticity. That authenticity is why Reba doesn't need to publicly broadcast her support at every opportunity. She's not trying to prove anything. And Kelly, in return, has never required performative loyalty. Because people who've been through the fire don't need fireworks to know they're loved. They recognize love in the quiet, in the text that says "you okay?"
in the honest advice delivered away from the microphones, in the silence that holds space rather than judgment. Still, for fans, the public perception has often been more reactive than reflective. Every time Reba is spotted at an event with Brandon, or acknowledges her own past with the Blackstock family, there's a ripple of speculation. Is she torn? Is she distancing from Kelly? Is it awkward? The truth is, real life doesn't move in black and white, and Reba McEntire, of all people, understands love in all its complicated shades. She can love her ex-stepchildren, and still adore the woman who was once her daughter-in-law. She can acknowledge pain without erasing memories, and she can stand in her truth without picking a side like it's a high school cafeteria. That idea of mature, multifaceted loyalty is something both she and Kelly have had to practice, not preach. Their lives have demanded it. Their careers thrive on strength, but their private lives are deeply rooted in empathy. Kelly, for her part, hasn't had an easy road. The years following the divorce weren't just emotional, they were relentless. Between long legal battles, the heavy burden of single motherhood, and the pressure to keep her career alive, she had every reason to break down. And yet, she stood tall, and when she couldn't stand, she leaned, not just on her team, but on the quiet support of those who knew her heart. Reba was one of those people. She's never left me hanging, Kelly once said quietly, in a behind-the-scenes show segment, and that means everything. When your world feels upside down, it's a simple sentence, but one packed with weight. Because even now, even as Kelly builds a new life, one where she's not just rebuilding, but rediscovering herself, she does so with the quiet backing of someone who truly deeply knows what it means to rebuild from the rubble. It was no accident that Reba once said of Kelly, "She's got the kind of strength the world sometimes forgets to see in women, especially in women who are soft-hearted." Strength doesn't mean loud. Sometimes it just means showing up again tomorrow, even if your knees are still shaking. That kind of support, quiet, consistent, rooted in understanding, is what has kept their bond intact while everything else shifted. The truth is, Reba didn't need to finally tell the world anything about Kelly Clarkson to prove her loyalty, but the power in her recent words, honest, clear, compassionate, served as a kind of balm, not just for Kelly or her fans, but for anyone who's ever felt forced to choose sides after love changes form. "I love Kelly," Reba said. "I always have. I always will. Divorce doesn't undo that for me." It's a statement simple on the outside, but radical at its core. In a world obsessed with canceling people based on their associations, in a culture where women are often pitted against each other after a breakup, Reba's decision to maintain respect and care for Kelly is a quiet rebellion. It strips away the drama, the accusations, the need for positioning, and replaces it with raw humanity. Because at the end of the day, what Reba McEntire offered was not an explanation or defense. She offered closure, grace, love without conditions, and fans noticed. They weren't just touched by the story, they were moved by the reminder that we're allowed to love without drawing battle lines. That healing doesn't always need a loud announcement, that moving forward doesn't mean leaving people behind. As Kelly continues to thrive, as a singer, as a mother, as a woman truly coming into her own, she carries with her not just the lessons learned, but the voices that stood beside her. And Reba's voice, while sometimes quiet in the noise of fame, remains one of the most enduring. Because some bonds aren't built for the camera, they're built to last. Today, when you look at Reba McEntire and Kelly Clarkson, you see two women who have evolved on parallel tracks, not despite the trials they've faced, but because of them. They've rebuilt themselves more than once, and they've done it in the most public of arenas. Both have stood trembling before crowds, both have felt the sting of betrayal, and the burden of starting over. And through it all, they've never lost the core of who they are: honest, emotional, grounded, and fiercely independent. Reba's choice to speak her truth about Kelly wasn't a PR move, or a strategy, or a way to reclaim headlines. It wasn't even for the fans, it was for herself. It was a declaration of how deeply she values the relationships that have shaped her life, even the ones that look different now than they did 10 years ago. People think because you divorce someone, the love you had for their family just disappears, Reba said. But that's not how love works. Not real love anyway. That sentence lingered, echoing across generations of fans who've been caught in the crossfire of fractured families, the children of divorced parents, the friends turned in-laws, who suddenly stopped being invited to holidays, the former stepmothers who still send birthday cards. Reba spoke for all of them, and in that message, she wasn't just showing up for Kelly, she was showing up for every person who's ever loved someone in a way that couldn't be defined or explained, just felt. Because yes, Reba's bond with Kelly came through family, but it lasted because of character, and it's that very character that has defined both women beyond their music careers. The legacy of Reba McEntire isn't just in her #1 hits, or her sold-out tours, or her award shelves lined with trophies. It's in the relationships she's nurtured, the way she's stayed true, and the promises she's kept even when the papers changed. As for Kelly, she continues writing her own songbook, not just in music, but in life. She's showing millions of people what it means to grieve loudly, to heal publicly, to parent through chaos, and to rise again without apology. She isn't just surviving post-divorce, she's thriving. And somewhere in the background, proud and steady as ever, is Reba, not waving a flag, not making it about herself, just cheering her on like she always has. What's remarkable about their relationship is that it defies easy labels. They were once family, they're artists, they're friends. They are, quite simply, two women walking different paths, but holding the same values close to their hearts. And the truth, that's something fans needed to hear. With all the noise of celebrity feuds, estrangements, and public fallouts, this story offers something often missing in the entertainment world: compassion, loyalty, and real love that evolves but doesn't disappear. That's why Reba's clarity on the subject felt so powerful, because she didn't owe it to the cameras, she didn't owe it to the tabloids. She said it because she wanted the world to understand something about her heart, and about Kelly's. She's a wonderful woman, Reba said. She's a damn good artist, and she's an even better mom. If that's not family, I don't know what is. With that, Reba closed the chapter not on a relationship, but on speculation, because there was never a rift to begin with. Just a world trying to understand a bond that didn't need defining. Family, as it turns out, isn't always about titles: daughter-in-law, stepmom, ex-husband. Sometimes the most lasting relationships come from connection, not convention. Over the years, fans have watched Reba and Kelly perform together, walk red carpets, laugh in interviews. But the most important parts of their relationship were the ones no one ever saw: the encouragement exchanged backstage, the calls on hard days, the kind word after a tough show, the mutual admiration that never needed headlines to be real. It's a relationship that's now matured, full of space, full of distance perhaps, but no less rooted in love. And maybe that's the most honest, most human truth of all. That some people enter your life through marriage, or work, or circumstance, but they remain in your heart because they see you, they lift you, they believe in you when everything else feels unsteady. That's what Kelly found in Reba, and that's what Reba gave without hesitation. So, at 70, Reba McEntire finally said what maybe everyone else needed more than she did: the truth about her bond with Kelly Clarkson. A truth that holds through changing times and titles. It's a truth that hums beneath every word of support, every bit of wisdom, every song shared, loud or quiet. Always family. Always love. Always Reba.